Welcome to Warhammer 40k 8th edition, Battle Report 18, 1850 points, Death Guard versus Ultramarines. The Death Guard will have 6 command points, and the Ultramarines will have 9 command points in this battle report. We will be playing on a random map deployment, and it is the chapter-approved Maelstrom of War mission, Kill Confirmed. Let's begin by taking a look at the board and where the terrain is on the board, along with where the objective markers have been placed. So we will start over in this corner of the board here, with objective marker 1, right next to this ruin. Moving over to the middle 2 foot by 2 foot section, we have objective marker 3, right here next to this ruin. And then finally, in this 2 foot by 2 foot section, the last section on this side of the board, we have objective marker 4 right here next to this crater and this ruin. Then moving over to the other side of the board, we have this 2 foot by 2 foot section. And objective marker 6 is right inside of this ruin here in the corner. Next is this middle 2 foot by 2 foot section with objective marker 2 up here inside the wall of this ruin towards the middle of the board. And finally this 2 foot by 2 foot section with the ruin right in the corner, and this ruin towards the middle along with that building right here. And of course objective marker 5 is right here close to this ruin in the corner. So now we will roll for which of the 6 random maps the armies will be playing on today. And here's the dice roll, getting a 2, which is Dawn of War. So now we will roll for which side of the board the armies will be deploying on. On a roll of a 1, 2, or a 3, the Death Guard will deploy on the left and the Ultramarines will deploy on the right. On a 4, 5, or 6, they will deploy on the opposite sides. And so here's the dice roll, getting a 1, and so the Death Guard will deploy on the left and the Ultramarines will deploy on the right. Now on a roll of a 1, 2, or a 3, the Death Guard will begin deploying first. On a roll of a 4, 5, or 6, the Ultramarines will begin deploying first. And that's a 1, so the Death Guard will begin deploying first. We will be back after the deployment. So now the armies have finished deploying. Death Guard began to deploy first, but the Ultramarines finished deploying first, so the Ultramarines will go first unless Death Guard is able to seize the initiative. Let's take a quick look at where the armies finished deploying. Starting over in the Death Guard deployment, we have a Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings, a squad of Nurglings sitting on objective marker 4, the Plague Burst Crawler, which is within 3 inches of the center of objective marker 3. The Death Guard Chaos Land Raider with the Plague Marines, Plague Surgeon, Malignant Plague Caster, and Tallyman all embarked inside. The Warlord for the Death Guard, Mortarion. The second squad of Nurgling Swarms sitting on objective marker 1. And finally, up against the edge, the final Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings. Over on the Ultramarine side of the deployment, we have the first Stormraven gunship with squad number 1 of the Assault Centurions and the first Chaplain, which has the Armor Indomitus embarked inside. In front of the Stormraven, we have the first squad of Tactical Marines sitting on objective marker 6. Then we have the Warlord for the Ultramarines, Rabout Guilliman, behind a second squad of Tactical Marines ready to move up to take Objective Marker 2. The second Stormraven gunship with the second squad of Assault Centurions and the second Chaplain embarked inside. And finally, over in this corner, we have the third squad of Tactical Marines holding onto Objective Marker 5. So now the Death Guard will attempt to seize the initiative, and they are looking for a 6. So here's the dice roll, getting a 2, and so the Ultramarines will go first. Let's go into Ultramarines turn 1. Going into Ultramarines turn 1, a reminder that the Ultramarines have 9 command points, and the Death Guard have 6 command points. And the Ultramarines began by drawing 3 new tactical objective cards, and they drew behind enemy lines. Score 1 victory point if you have at least 1 unit completely within the enemy's deployment zone at the end of your turn. If you have at least 3 units within your opponent's deployment zone at the end of your turn, score D3 victory points instead. No mercy, no respite. Score 1 victory point if at least 1 enemy unit was destroyed and or failed a morale test this turn. If 3 or more units were destroyed and or failed morale tests, score D3 victory points instead. And finally, Supremacy. Score D3 victory points if you control any 3 objective markers at the end of your turn. Going into the movement phase of Ultramarines turn 1, this squad of Tactical Marines is going to move up the board 6 inches. And they will move up the board right to here. They are now within 3 inches of the center of Objective Marker 2, which does mean that as of right now, the Ultramarines are controlling 3 objective markers. Now Guilliman, the Warlord, will move up to 8 inches to be behind the Tactical Marines. And Guilliman will finish his movement right here. This squad of Tactical Marines sitting on Objective Marker 6 will remain still. This Stormraven gunship will remain in flying mode, and it will pivot up to 90 degrees to be facing towards Guilliman, and will move at least 20, but less than 45 inches to get within 6 inches of Guilliman. And so after moving about 24 inches, the Stormraven will end up right here, and it is within 6 inches of Rabout Guilliman. This squad of Tactical Marines sitting on Objective Marker 5 will remain still. This Stormraven gunship is going to drop into hover mode, which means it now has a movement characteristic of 20 inches, and it is going to hover up the board up to 20 inches in order to be closer to Rabout Guilliman. And it will finish its movement right here, still facing forward. And Guilliman is right in here for reference, and now within 6 inches. Going into the shooting phase for Ultramarines turn 1, the last cannon from this Tactical Marine squad, which is sitting on Objective Marker 6, will fire at the Chaos Land Raider because it is within 48-inch range, and he can see. So, 1 shot, hitting on a 3, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it wounds. Minus 3 AP, so 1 5-up armor save, which passes. And now, this last cannon from this Tactical Marine squad will also fire at the same Chaos Land Raider because it is able to see, and it is within 48-inch range. And for this second Tactical Marine squad, the Ultramarines will use the stratagem Scions of Guilliman for 1 command point, bringing them from 9 down to 8. Use this stratagem when an Ultramarines infantry or Ultramarines biker unit is selected to attack in a shooting or a fight phase. You can reroll all hit rolls of 1 for that unit for the rest of the phase. If the unit is a tactical squad or intercessor squad, reroll all failed hit rolls instead. So first, on a 5-up, thanks to Guilliman's Warlord trait, do they get the command point back? And they do not. So the Ultramarines are now permanently down to 8 command points. Now the last cannon will fire into the Chaos Land Raider, hitting on a 3. And it fails to hit, but re-rolling thanks to Scions of Guilliman. And here's the re-roll, and still fails to hit. So now the Tactical Marine squad sitting in front of Guilliman is all within 24 inches of the Chaos Land Raider, so the last cannon will fire, although it will subtract 1 from hit rolls thanks to moving, and the 4 bolt guns will also fire into the Chaos Land Raider. Starting with the last cannon, hitting on a 4, re-rolling 1s and 2s thanks to Guilliman. And here's the re-roll, and still fails to hit. Now the 4 bolt guns at 24-inch range, hitting on 3s. And re-rolling the 2 2s, thanks to Guilliman. And here's the 2 re-rolls. And getting 3 hits. Wounding on 6s. getting 1 wound and 2 rerolls thanks to Guilliman. And here's the 2 rerolls, getting 1 more wound. 2 up armor saves, and fails 1 of them. So this Chaos Land Raider will drop from 16 starting wounds down to 15. Now Guilliman will also fire into the Chaos Land Raider because he is also within 24-inch range with his Hand of Dominion in shooting form. 3 shots hitting on 2s and getting 3 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 1 wound and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls and getting 3 wounds. -1 AP, so 3 3-up armor saves. Passes 2 and fails 1. However, since these are 2 damage apiece, Death Guard is going to use 1 command point, going from 6 down to 5, in order to reroll the 2. And here's the reroll, and passes with a 6. So no further damage will be taken. So now the Storm Raven that dropped into hover mode this turn will fire its 2 Hurricane Bolters at 24-inch range into Mortarion, and then it will fire everything else, meaning its Twin Heavy Bolter, its Twin Heavy Plasma Cannon, and its 2 Stormstrike Missile Launchers into the Chaos Land Raider. So, starting with the 2 Hurricane Bolters onto Mortarion. 12 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 7 hits and 5 rerolls. And here's the 5 rerolls, getting 11 hits total. Wounding on 5s, getting 4 wounds and 7 rerolls. And here's the rerolls, getting no more wounds. 4 3-up armor saves, passes 3 and fails 1. 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which passes. So now the Storm Raven firing into the Chaos Land Raider, starting with the Twin Heavy Bolter. 6 shots hitting on 3s, and all 6 hit. Wounding on 5s. Wow, getting 4 wounds and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls, getting 1 more wound. -1 AP, so 5 3-up armor saves, and fails 2 of them. So the Chaos Land Raider will drop from 15 wounds down to 13. 2 Stormstrike Missile Launchers, 1 shot apiece, hitting on 3s, getting 1 hit and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, still failing to hit. Wounding on a 4, and it fails to wound, but getting a reroll, which does wound. -3 AP, so 1 5-up armor save, which fails, and that will do 3 damage. So the Chaos Land Raider will drop from 13 wounds down to 10. Finally, the Twin Heavy Plasma Cannon is going to fire supercharged shots. So 2 D3 shots, getting 5 shots. Hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits and 3 misses. Here's the 3 rerolls, getting 2 more hits and 1-1, which will do 1 mortal wound to the Storm Raven. So the hovering Storm Raven will go from 14 starting wounds down to 13. But the 4 that hit, wound on 4s, getting 2 wounds and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls, getting 1 more wound. -3 AP, so 3 5-up armor saves, and passes 2 of them, failing 1. And they do 2 damage apiece, so the Chaos Land Raider will fall from 10 remaining wounds down to 8. So finally, the Storm Raven that is still in flying mode is within 24 inches of the Chaos Land Raider, and so it will fire everything that it has into the Chaos Land Raider. Starting with the 2 Stormstrike Missile Launchers. 2 shots hitting on 3s, getting 1 hit and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, getting a 2nd hit. Wounding on 4s, and getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up armor saves, passes 1 and fails 1. And they do 3 damage apiece, so the Chaos Land Raider will fall from 8 wounds down to 5 left. 6 shots from the Twin Heavy Bolter, hitting on 3s, getting 5 hits and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, all 6 hit. Wounding on 5s, all fail to wound. And here's the rerolls, getting 2 wounds. 2 3-up armor saves, and fails 1. So the Chaos Land Raider will fall from 5 wounds down to 4. Next, the Twin Heavy Plasma Cannon will fire supercharged shots, so 2 D3 shots, getting 3 shots, but the Ultramarines are going to spend 1 command point for a command reroll, going from 8 down to 7 in order to reroll the 2. First, do they get the command point back on a 5? And they do, so they will remain at 8 command points. Then here's the reroll, getting another 5, so that puts them from 3 shots up to 5 shots. So 5 shots with the twin heavy plasma cannon, hitting on 3s, getting 4 hits and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, getting a 5th hit, wounding on 4s, getting 2 wounds and 3 rerolls. And here's the 3 rerolls, getting 5 wounds, 5 up armor saves, and fails all 5, so that is 10 damage. Which means the Land Raider with 4 wounds left will definitely be killed off. On a 6, it explodes, and it does not explode. So the final 4 wounds on the Chaos Land Raider are removed, and now everyone inside will emergency disembark. And all of the units inside will disembark right here. We have the Tallyman, the Plague Surgeon, the Malignant Plaguecaster, and then the 7 Plague Marines, with the Plague Champion being right here. However, this does mean that now the Chaos Land Raider is removed, and that is First Blood. This does mean, unfortunately for the Ultramarines, that the 2 Hurricane Bolters on the Storm Raven go to waste because they did declare to attack the Land Raider. But Death Guard now has to roll a dice for each model that disembarked from that Land Raider, since it was an emergency disembarkation, and every roll of a 1 will remove a model, and the Death Guard have already used a command reroll in the shooting phase, so they will not be able to reroll any 1s. So here's the dice roll, and they get 4 1s. So 4 models are removed. And so the 4 Plague Marines with Bubotic Axes will be the models removed, leaving just 3 models left alive in the Plague Marine squad. And that is the end of the Ultramarines turn 1 shooting phase. So going into the Ultramarines turn 1 assault phase, there are no charges to declare because there are no enemy units within 12 inches. And this does mean, of course, that there are no fights to resolve in the fight phase. However, going into the morale phase, the Plague Marines will have to take a morale test since the champion has a leadership of 8. But they did lose 4 models this turn. And so here is the Plague Marines morale test, and they rolled a 4, which means they pass. So they will not lose any more models. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards, the Ultramarines failed to achieve behind enemy lines since they have no units within the Death Guard deployment zone. They did, however, complete No Mercy, No Respite, score 1 victory point if at least 1 enemy unit was destroyed and or failed morale test. If 3 or more units were destroyed and or failed morale tests, score D3 victory points instead. 1 enemy unit was destroyed and there were no morale tests failed, so that is worth 1 victory point. And then finally, Supremacy is worth D3 victory points because the Ultramarines are holding 3 objective markers this turn. And so here's the D3 roll, and it will net them 3 extra victory points. And with all of the victory points assigned, the Ultramarines are going to throw away behind enemy lines. This way, in Ultramarines turn 2, they can draw 3 new tactical objective cards. And so at the end of Ultramarines turn 1, the score currently sits at 5 victory points for the Ultramarines, thanks to First Blood, and 0 victory points for the Death Guard. Going into Death Guard turn 1, a reminder that the Death Guard have 5 command points left, and the Ultramarines have 8 command points left. The Death Guard started by drawing 3 new tactical objective cards, and they drew Secure Objective 1, score 1 victory point if you control Objective Marker 1 at the end of your turn. Defend Objective 1, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 1 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Master the Warp, score 1 victory point if you manifested or denied a psychic power during this turn. If you manifested or denied 3 or more psychic powers, score D3 victory points instead. And Objective Marker 1 is right here, currently being held by a squad of Nurgling Swarms. So going into the movement phase for Death Guard turn 1, they will start by having this squad of Nurgling Swarms sitting on Objective Marker 4 remain still. Then the Demon Prince of Nurgle, with wings, will move 12 inches up the board, and it will also declare an advance. And here's its advance roll, getting 2 extra inches for 14 inches of total movement. And the Demon Prince will finish its movement right here. Next, this squad of Nurgling Swarms, sitting on Objective Marker 1, will also remain still. Next, this Demon Prince of Nurgle, sitting behind the ruin, will move up the board 12 inches, and he will also declare an advance. And here's its advance roll, getting 5 additional inches for 17 inches of total movement. And the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings will end up right here. Next, this Plague Burst Crawler will remain still. The Death Guard Warlord Mortarion will move up the board up to 12 inches. And he will finish his movement here so that he is now sitting nicely in this crater. Finally, these various units will move up the board, starting with this squad of Plague Marines, and they will move 5 inches up the board. And they will finish their movement right here. Next, the Tallyman will move up 5 inches behind them, and the Tallyman will finish his movement right here. Then the Plague Surgeon will move up 5 inches, right to there. And finally, the Malignant Plaguecaster will move up the board, and he will finish his movement right here. Going into the Psychic phase, for Death Guard turn 1, we will start with this Demon Prince of Nurgle, casting Smite onto these Tactical Marines. It has a warp charge value of 5, and he does get it with a 5. The Ultramarines have no Deny the Witch, so it will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 3 mortal wounds. And so the 3 regular Tactical Marines sitting on Objective Marker 5 will all be killed off. Next, Mortarion will attempt to manifest Miasma of Pestilence onto himself, and then he will attempt to manifest Smite onto the hovering Storm Raven. So Miasma of Pestilence has a warp charge value of 6, and he does get it with an 8. Now for Smite onto the hovering Storm Raven, and he gets it with a 7. It will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 3 mortal wounds. However, the Ultramarines are going to use the stratagem Armor of Contempt for 1 command point, bringing them from 8 down to 7. Use this stratagem when an Adeptus Astartes vehicle suffers a mortal wound. Roll a d6 for that mortal wound and each other mortal wound inflicted on this model for the rest of the phase. On a 5-up, that mortal wound is ignored and has no effect. So first, on a 5-up, do they get the command point back? And they do not, so the Ultramarines are permanently down to 7 command points. But now they get to roll a dice for each mortal wound suffered from Smite onto that Storm Raven. So 3 dice looking for 5-ups, and they fail all 3. So 3 mortal wounds will go through. So that will drop the hovering Storm Raven from 13 wounds down to 10. So now the Malignant Plaguecaster will attempt to manifest Putrescent Vitality onto the Plague Marines, and he will also attempt to manifest Smite onto the hovering Storm Raven. Starting with Putrescent Vitality, which has a warp charge value of 6, and it fails with a 5. However, the Death Guard will use 1 command point, going from 5 down to 4, in order to use a command reroll to reroll the 1. And here's the reroll. Getting another 4, which means it does pass with an 8. So the 3 Plague Marines that are left will be +1 strength and +1 toughness until the start of the next Death Guard Psychic phase. Finally, Smite onto the hovering Storm Raven, and it passes with a 10. It will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do another 3 mortal wounds. So the Storm Raven can attempt to deny the mortal wounds, looking for 3 5-ups, and gets 2 of them, but still takes 1 additional mortal wound. So that will drop the Storm Raven from 10 wounds down to 9 left. That is the end of the Death Guard Psychic phase, and the Death Guard did successfully manifest 5 psychic powers this turn. So, going into the shooting phase, the Death Guard will start with this Plague Burst Crawler, which will fire its Heavy Slugger into this squad of Tactical Marines, and then it will fire its Plague Burst Mortar and its 2 Entropy Cannons into the hovering Storm Raven. Starting with the Heavy Slugger, 4 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. And Mortarion is over 7 inches away, so he does not get to reroll the 1. So 2 hits, wounding on 3s, and getting 1 wound. -1 AP, so 1 4-up armor save, which passes. So now the 2 Entropy Cannons into the Storm Raven, hitting on 4s, and both fail to hit. Finally, the Plague Burst Mortar will do D6 shots, getting just 1 shot, but now that it's a different phase, the Death Guard will use 1 command point for a command reroll, going from 4 command points down to 3 in order to reroll the number of shots. And here's the reroll, getting 5 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, and getting 2 wounds. -2 AP, so 2 5-up armor saves, and fails both. They will do 3d3 damage apiece, doing 4 damage. So the hovering Storm Raven will fall from 9 wounds down to 5 left. The Plague Champion is going to fire its bolt pistol into this squad of Tactical Marines, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 4, and it wounds. 1 3-up armor save, which fails. So 1 Tactical Marine with a bolt gun will go down. Finally, Mortarion will fire the Lantern into the hovering Storm Raven. 1 shot, hitting on a 2, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. Going into the assault phase, thanks to the 1 Tactical Marine with a bolt gun that was killed off in the shooting phase, there is nothing within 12 inches for the Death Guard to attempt to charge, so there will be no charges declared in the assault phase, and therefore there will be no fights to resolve in the fight phase. So going into the morale phase, this squad of Tactical Marines that we can see in between the 2 Storm Ravens lost 1 model. However, thanks to being Ultramarines, the Sergeant has a leadership of 9, and therefore it is impossible for them to fail a morale check after only losing 1 model. And this squad of Tactical Marines lost 3 models this turn. However, thanks to being an Ultramarine with a leadership of 9 on the Sergeant, it is impossible for them to fail a morale check after losing 3 models. So they will also not have to take a morale test. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards, the Death Guard did successfully secure Objective 1 for 1 victory point. And while they did not finish it, they are now 1 turn into defending Objective 1, so they will hold on to that. And they also completed Master the Warp, which means they get D3 victory points, since they successfully manifested 5 psychic powers this turn. And so here's their D3 roll, and they also get 3 victory points. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 1, the score currently sits at 4 victory points for the Death Guard and 5 victory points for the Ultramarines. Going into Ultramarines turn 2, a reminder that the Ultramarines have 7 command points left, and the Death Guard have 3 command points left. At the start of their turn, the Ultramarines draw 3 new tactical objective cards since they cleared the board the previous turn, and so they started by drawing Master the Warp, score 1 victory point if you manifested or denied a psychic power during this turn. If you manifested or denied 3 or more psychic powers, score D3 victory points instead. Defend Objective 6, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 6 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Priority Orders Received. When this tactical objective is generated, immediately generate a bonus tactical objective. This does not count towards the number of active tactical objectives you currently have in play. Your Warlord is the only unit that can be used to achieve the bonus tactical objective. They must be the only unit used to control an objective marker, the unit that destroys the last model in an enemy unit, and so on. If you achieve this, you score both the number of victory points stated on the bonus tactical objective and an additional 3 victory points. If this tactical objective is discarded, so too is the bonus tactical objective. And the bonus tactical objective is no prisoners. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during your turn. If between 3 and 5 enemy units were destroyed during your turn, score D3 victory points instead. If 6 or more enemy units were destroyed during your turn, score D3 plus 3 victory points instead. And because that goes along with Priority Orders Received, only Guilliman is able to achieve that tactical objective card of no prisoners. And Objective Marker 6 for Defend Objective 6 is right here, currently being held by this squad of Tactical Marines. So going into the movement phase, this squad of Tactical Marines will remain still. This squad of Tactical Marines will also remain still. The Assault Centurion squad and the Chaplain embarked inside of the hovering Storm Raven will disembark. And they will all disembark right in here within 3 inches of the base of the Storm Raven. And now, the Centurions and the Chaplain will all move up towards Mortarion. The Centurions have a 4-inch movement, the Chaplain has a 6-inch movement, but both the Centurions and the Chaplain will declare advance rolls. And so, starting with the Centurions, here's their advance roll, getting 2 additional inches for 6 inches of total movement. However, the Centurions are going to use a command point, going from 7 down to 6, to use a command reroll in order to reroll the number of inches. So first, on a 5-up, do they get the command point back? and they do not, so they are permanently down to 6 command points. But now re-rolling the number of inches for their advance, and they get 6 additional inches, so 10 inches of total movement for the Centurion Assault Squad. And now the Chaplain will declare its advance, and will get 2 inches for 8 inches of total movement. And so with their 10 inches of movement after advancing and moving around the ruin, the 3 Centurions will end up here with the Sergeant in the front, and the Chaplain, who had 8 inches of total movement after advancing, will end up right down here. And now, all 3 Centurions are within 8 inches of Mortarion, which is important since they are all armed with flamers. Next, this Storm Raven, which started the turn in hover mode, is going to now, after the units inside disembarked, pop back into flying mode, pivot up to 90 degrees, and fly over in this direction, away from the camera, at least 20 inches, but less than 30, now that it's down to 5 wounds. And so now the Storm Raven will end up over here, making sure to stay well over an inch away from the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings, but now that Demon Prince of Nurgle is definitely the closest visible enemy unit for the purpose of targeting. Next, this squad of 4 Tactical Marines is going to move up the board up to 6 inches. And they will finish their movement like so. This way, the last cannon did not actually have to move, which means that the last cannon will remain still for the purpose of firing a heavy weapon in the shooting phase, but the 3 bolt guns, including the Sergeant, did move, and now all 3 bolt guns are within 12-inch rapid-fire range of the 3 Plague Marines. Next, Guilliman is going to move up the board up to 8 inches. And Guilliman is going to finish his movement right here. He is about 7.5 inches away from Mortarion, which means if he wanted to charge Mortarion, he would need a 9-inch charge. Finally, this Storm Raven, which started the turn in flying mode, is going to drop down into hover mode and will move up to 20 inches up the board. And the Storm Raven will finish its movement right there in hover mode. Going into the shooting phase, the Ultramarines are going to start with this Tactical Marine squad, which will fire everything that it has into this Demon Prince of Nurgle, and every Tactical Marine model is within 24 inches of that Demon Prince. And they will start off by using the Stratagem Scions of Guilliman for 1 command point so that they can re-roll failed hit rolls. However, thanks to Guilliman, on a 5-up, they will get the command point back. So here's that roll. They failed to get the command point back. So because of that, the Ultramarines did drop from 6 command points down to 5, and they will permanently be at 5 command points. So starting with the last cannon, 1 shot, hitting on a 3, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which fails, and it will do D6 damage. And it will do 3 damage. 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passes 1 and fails 2, which means that this Demon Prince will drop from 8 starting wounds down to 6. Now for 4 bolt guns, hitting on 3s and getting 4 hits, wounding on 5s and getting 2 wounds, 2 3-up armor saves and passes both. Next, this flying Storm Raven is going to fire everything that it has into this Demon Prince of Nurgle next to it. Starting with 24 shots from the 2 Hurricane Bolters, hitting on 4s with 1 cocked dice. So getting 11 hits so far, and here's the cocked dice, which gets a 12th hit. So 12 hits, 12 misses. Wounding on 5s. And getting 2 wounds. 2 3-up armor saves, and fails both. 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails both of those as well. So this Demon Prince will fall from 8 starting wounds down to 6. Next will be the Twin Heavy Bolter. 6 shots, hitting on 4s, and getting 4 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 1 wound. 1 4-up armor save, which fails. 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which also fails. So this Demon Prince will fall from 6 wounds down to 5. 2 Storm Strike missile launchers hitting on 4s, and both fail to hit. But the Ultramarines are going to use 1 command point for a command reroll, going from 5 down to 4 in order to reroll one of those 3s. So first, on a 5-up, do they get the command point back? And they do not, so they are permanently down to 4 command points. But on a 4-up, it hits, and it will hit. Should have done that in the opposite order, apparently. 1 hit with the Storm Strike missile launcher, wounding on a 3, and it does wound. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which fails. 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and all 3 failed. So the Demon Prince will fall from 5 wounds down to 2. Finally, on that Storm Raven, the twin heavy plasma cannon will fire, and it will shoot standard shots. So 2 D3 shots, and gets 3 shots, hitting on 4s, and all fail to hit, rolling a 1, so it's a good thing they were standard shots. Now this Tactical Marine squad with the 1 last cannon and 1 bolt gun will fire into the Demon Prince. The Sergeant will fire his bolt gun first, hitting on a 4, and it hits, wounding on a 5, and it wounds. 1 3-up armor save, which passes. So 1 last cannon shot hitting on a 3, and it hits. I think I might have said that the Sergeant hit on a 4. It should have hit on a 3, but it hit either way. But the last cannon hits with the 3, because they did not move, wounding on a 3, and fails to wound. They've already used a command reroll this turn. Next, the 3 Centurions will fire into Mortarion. So 6 D6 shots, which will give them 22 shots. This weapon automatically hits, so 22 hits, wounding on 5s. And that will result in 6 wounds. 6 3-up armor saves. And that's 4 fails. 4 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls. Passes 1 and fails 3. So Mortarion will fall from 18 starting wounds down to 15. Next, Guilliman is going to fire, rapid fire, with his Hand of Dominion into those 3 Plague Marines. 6 shots with the Hand of Dominion, hitting on 2s, getting 5 hits and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, getting 6 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 5 wounds and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, getting 6 wounds, minus 1 AP, so 6 4-up armor saves, passing 4, failing 2. And they are 2 damage apiece, so the first one, 2 disgustingly resilient, and 1 Plague Marine will go down. And then the second shot, passing 1, failing 1. And the Death Guard are going to use a command point for a command reroll, going from 3 down to 2 left in order to reroll the 1. Here's the reroll. So a second Plague Marine will still go down. And so the 2 Flails of Corruption will be removed, leaving the champion with his Power Fist. Next, this Storm Raven, which is now in hover mode, will fire everything that it has into Mortarion, who is within 12 inches. Starting with the 2 Hurricane Bolters, 24 shots, hitting on 3s, with 1 cocked dice. And here's the cocked dice, getting another hit. So that is 13 hits and 11 misses. But thanks to Guilliman, re-rolling, and only getting 3 misses overall, so that is 21 hits. But Mortarion got off Miasma of Pestilence, which means we have to subtract 1 from hit rolls. But luckily, that takes place after rerolls happen, so it wouldn't have affected the rerolls, but that means all of the 3s have to be removed. And so because of that, the Storm Raven ends up with 14 hits instead of 21, wounding on 5s, getting 5 wounds and 9 rerolls. So here's the 9 rerolls, and all of them failed to wound. So no 5s and 6s from 9 dice. So now 5 3-up armor saves, and he passes 4, failing 1. 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which does fail. So Mortarion will drop from 15 wounds down to 14. Now the twin heavy bolter, 6 shots, hitting on 4s, rerolling 1s and 2s, getting 4 hits, 1 definite miss, and 1 reroll. And here's the 1 reroll, getting another hit, wounding on 5s, getting 3 wounds and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls, still failing to wound. Minus 1 AP, so 3 4-up armor saves, passes 1 and fails 2. 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails both of them. So now Mortarion will drop from 14 wounds down to 12. 2 Storm Strike missile launchers, hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, still failing to hit. Wounding on a 3, and failing to wound, but re-rolling. And here's the reroll, getting a wound. 1 4-up invulnerable save, which fails. 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails all 3 of them. So now Mortarion will drop from 12 wounds down to 9. Finally, from this Storm Raven, the twin heavy plasma cannon, which will fire supercharged shots. So 2 D3 shots, getting 3 shots. Hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits and 1 failed, which cannot be rerolled because rerolls happen before modifiers. So 2 hits, 1 definite miss. However, there were no 1s, so no mortal wounds onto the Storm Raven. And because it's supercharged, it is strength 8 versus toughness 7, so wounding on 3s, getting 1 wound and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, still failing to wound. 1 4-up invulnerable save, which passes. So now this squad of tactical marines, right here, is within 12 inches of Mortarion as well, at least for the bolt guns. So 3 rapid fire bolt guns and 1 last cannon into Mortarion. Starting with the last cannon, hitting on a 4. Fails to hit, but re-rolling. And here's the re-roll, still failing to hit. 6 bolt gun shots, hitting on 4s. Getting 3 hits and 3 rerolls. And here's the rerolls, still not getting any more hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 1 wound and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls, getting 1 more wound. 2 3-up armor saves, and fails both. 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails both of those. So Mortarion will fall from 9 wounds down to 7. So going into the assault phase for Ultramarines turn 2, there is 1 charge to declare, and it is Guilliman declaring a multi-charge onto the Plague Champion as the primary target and Mortarion as the secondary target. He will need 6 inches to make it into combat with the Plague Champion, but because Mortarion is within a crater, he would need 9 inches to make it into combat with Mortarion. So obviously, we will start with Overwatch. And unfortunately for the Death Guard, Guilliman needs 6 inches to make it within an inch of the Plague Champion, but he's really more like 6.5 inches away, which means the crack grenade cannot be thrown in Overwatch. So, 1 bolt pistol from the Plague Champion, hitting on a 6, and it fails to hit. Then Mortarion will fire the lantern, hitting on a 6, and that also fails to hit. So now the charge distance, needing at least 6, but looking for a 9. And he gets it with a 10, so more than enough. And because of that extra inch with the 10-inch charge, he will now be in base-to-base with both the Plague Champion and Mortarion. And as the only charging unit, Guilliman will go first. But first, we do need to resolve, at the beginning of the fight phase, Mortarion's Host of Plagues. But now that he's down to just 7 wounds, it only activates on a 5-up, and it will not activate. And so Guilliman has 6 attacks base, and he will use all 6 attacks with the Emperor's Sword profile, and he will place 2 attacks onto the Plague Champion and 4 attacks onto Mortarion. Also, in the fight phase, the Ultramarines are going to use the stratagem Death to the Traitors for 1 command point, which will drop them from 4 down to 3. But on a 5-up, they get the command point back. And they will get the command point back, so they will stay at 4 command points. And Death to the Traitors reads as such. Use this stratagem when an Adeptus Astartes unit is chosen to attack in the fight phase. Each time you roll a hit roll of 6 up for a model in this unit during this phase, it can, if it was targeting a Heretic Astartes unit, immediately make an extra attack against the same unit using the same weapon. These extra attacks cannot themselves generate any further attacks. And obviously, Guilliman will be the chosen target of that stratagem, so any hit rolls of 6 will generate further attacks, at least against the Plague Champion, because he has to subtract 1 against Mortarion. But 2 attacks with the Emperor's Sword onto the Plague Champion, hitting on 2s and getting 2 hits. Strength 8 versus Toughness 5 means 3s to wound. 1 wound, and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, still failing to wound. -4 AP, so the Plague Champion will not get a save. And it does an automatic 3 damage. So 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls. And passes 1 but fails 2, which means that Plague Champion is automatically dead, because there's no point in re-rolling one of them. So the Plague Champion is killed off, and that will mean that Guilliman will complete priority orders received. So now, the 4 attacks with the Emperor's Sword onto Mortarion. Hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, and of course rolling a 2. But the Ultramarines are going to use 1 command point for 1 command reroll in order to reroll the 2. So first, on a 5-up, do they get the command point back? And they do not. So the Ultramarines are now permanently down to 3 command points. But here's the reroll, and they do get the extra hit. Now, unfortunately, because of Miasma Pestilence, that 6 does not generate an additional attack. But 4 hits, Strength 8 versus Toughness 7, means wounding on 3s. Getting 3 wounds and 1 reroll, and the 6 does generate an additional D3 automatic mortal wounds on top of it. So here's the 1 reroll, and it does get an additional wound. So we have 4 normal wounds plus D3 mortal wounds, and that will do 2 mortal wounds. So the 2 disgustingly resilient rolls against the mortal wounds. 1 passes, 1 fails. So Mortarion will fall from 7 wounds down to 6 left. And now 4 4-up invulnerable saves. Passes 2 and fails 2. And the Death Guard are going to use 1 command point, going from 2 down to 1, in order to use a command reroll to reroll one of the 2s. So here's the reroll. And it does pass, since he has a 4-up invuln. So the one that goes through does 3 damage, so 3 disgustingly resilient rolls. Passes 1 and fails 2. So Mortarion will fall from 6 wounds down to 4 left. But now, Mortarion will get to attack back. So Mortarion, now that he's down to 4 wounds, only has 4 attacks base, so he will use all 4 attacks with silence, and he will use the eviscerating blow. So 4 attacks hitting on 2s, getting 3 hits and 1 reroll thanks to himself being able to reroll 1s. And here's the reroll. Getting a 4th hit. Strength 16 versus Toughness 5 thanks to his Toxic Presence means wounding on 2s. Getting 3 wounds and 1 reroll thanks to being a plague weapon. And here's the reroll. Getting a 4th wound. 4 3-up invulnerable saves. Fails 1 and passes 3. So the one that goes through will do D6 damage. And it will only do 1 damage. So Guilliman will go from 9 wounds down to 8. So now for Mortarion's Attendant's Claws and Teeth, D6 attacks, doing just 1 attack. It will hit on a 2, and it hits. Wounding on a 6, and it fails to wound, but does get to reroll because it is a plague weapon, and thanks to his Warlord trait, he gets to reroll all failed wound rolls with plague weapons, instead of just 1s. So here's the reroll, and it still fails to wound. So that is the end of the fight phase, and they are both already in base to base, so they cannot consolidate any further. And going into the morale phase, there are no morale tests to take. So, taking a look at the tactical objective cards, the Ultramarines failed to achieve Master the Warp, and they will throw that one away because they have no Psychers. The Ultramarines are now 1 turn into defending Objective 6, so they will hold on to that. And thanks to Guilliman killing off that Plague Champion and therefore finishing off that Plague Marine squad, he did complete no prisoners for 1 victory point, but because it was part of priority orders received, they get 4 victory points from that, because they get an additional 3. And so at the end of Ultramarines turn 2, the score currently sits at 9 victory points for the Ultramarines and 4 victory points for the Death Guard. Going into Death Guard turn 2, a reminder that the Death Guard have 1 command point left, and the Ultramarines have 3 command points left. Also a reminder that the Death Guard held on to defend Objective 1 from the previous turn, and they are one turn into holding Objective Marker 1. So the Death Guard needed to draw 2 new tactical objective cards, and they drew Secure Objective 2, score 1 victory point if you control Objective Marker 2 at the end of your turn, and Grandfather's Gift, score 1 victory point if at least one enemy unit was completely destroyed during your turn, and the last model in the unit was slain by an attack made by a Death Guard model attacking with a Plague weapon, i.e. a Plague Sword, the Plague Skull of Glotha, or any weapon with the Plague weapon ability. And Objective Marker 1 is right here, currently being held by this squad of Nurgling Swarms. And Objective Marker 2 is right here, near this squad of Tactical Marines. Going into the movement phase of Death Guard turn 2, this Demon Prince of Nurgle with 2 wounds left is going to jump over to the other side of the Storm Raven. And it will finish its movement right here. This squad of Nurgling Swarms sitting on Objective Marker 1 will remain still. Mortarion will remain locked in combat with Rabaul Guilliman. These 3 units right here are all separate, and they will all reposition themselves up to 5 inches. Making sure, of course, to stay just over an inch away, we have the Plague Surgeon, the Tallyman, and then the Malignant Plague Caster. This Plague Burst Crawler will remain still. This squad of Nurgling Swarms sitting on Objective Marker 4 will also remain still. This Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings is going to move 12 inches towards the Storm Raven in hover mode and Rabaul Guilliman, and he will also declare an advance. And here's its advance roll, getting an additional 4 inches for 16 inches of total movement. And the Demon Prince will end up right here. Going into the Psychic phase of Death Guard turn 2, this Demon Prince of Nurgle, the one that has 2 wounds left, is going to manifest Smite onto the Storm Raven. And it has a warp charge value of 5, and it fails with a 4. Next, this Demon Prince will attempt to manifest Smite onto this Storm Raven, the one that's in hover mode. And it has a warp charge value of 5, and it gets it with a 6. So D3 mortal wounds, causing just 1 mortal wound. So this Storm Raven will fall from 14 starting wounds down to 13. Now Mortarion will attempt to manifest Miasma of Pestilence onto himself, and he will attempt to manifest Smite onto Guilliman. And he will start with Smite, which has a warp charge value of 5, and he gets it with a 12, so that will cause Perils of the Warp, but it will also do D6 mortal wounds onto Guilliman. So starting with the D6 mortal wounds onto Guilliman, and it will cause 1 mortal wound. So the Death Guard are going to use their last command point, going from 1 down to 0, in order to reroll the number of mortal wounds caused onto Guilliman. Here's the reroll, still just getting 1 mortal wound. So Guilliman will drop from 8 wounds down to 7. And now, thanks to Perils of the Warp, D3 mortal wounds onto himself will do just 1 mortal wound. So he gets 1 disgustingly resilient roll, which fails. And that is the 4th roll of a 1 in a row. What's up with that? So Mortarion will fall from 4 wounds down to 3 left. Now for Miasma of Pestilence onto himself, which he gets with a 6. So now this Malignant Plague Caster will attempt to manifest Smite onto Guilliman, and he will also attempt to manifest Gift of Contagion onto Guilliman. Starting with Smite, which has a warp charge value of 5, and he gets it with a 9. It will cause D3 mortal wounds, and it will cause 2 mortal wounds. So Guilliman will fall from 7 wounds down to 5 left. And now for Gift of Contagion, which has a warp charge value of 7. And he gets it with a 7. So rolling a D3 for the table, gets a 1, which is Flyblown Palsy, which is -1 attack. So Guilliman will have -1 attack until the start of the next Death Guard Psychic phase. Going into the shooting phase, for Death Guard turn 2, Mortarion will start by firing the Lantern into Rabaul Guilliman, since it is a pistol weapon. Hitting on a 2, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. Next, all 3 of these units will fire into the Storm Raven, which is in hover mode, and thanks to the Storm Raven's wing, it is within 7 inches of Mortarion, meaning it has to subtract 1 from its toughness characteristic. So the Malignant Plague Caster and the Plague Surgeon are going to throw crack grenades at the Storm Raven, and the Tallyman will fire a supercharged shot from its plasma pistol. So, starting with the Tallyman and its plasma pistol, 1 supercharged shot, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 1 6-up armor save, which it passes. Wow, okay. Plague Surgeon, throwing a crack grenade, hitting on a 3, and it fails to hit. Malignant Plaguecaster, throwing a crack grenade, and it hits, wounding on a 4, and it fails to wound. Next, the Plague Burst Crawler is going to fire its 2 entropy cannons into the Storm Raven. It will also fire its Heavy Slugger into the Storm Raven. However, it is within 12 inches, which means it cannot fire its Plague Burst Mortar. So it will fire the Plague Burst Mortar at the squad of 2 Tactical Marines on the far side of the map in the Ruin, the squad that only has the Sergeant and the last cannon left. So, starting with the Plague Burst Mortar, and it will do D6 shots, getting 5 shots. Hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 2s, getting 2 wounds. Minus 2 AP, but plus 1 AP for being in the Ruin. So 2 4-up armor saves, passes 1 and fails 1. And so the Sergeant will be killed off. And because they are Ultramarines, the regular Tactical Marines have a leadership of 8, which means it's impossible to fail a morale check after only losing 1 model. And there are no other units that can shoot at that Tactical Marine, so they will not have to take a morale test in the morale phase. Now for the 2 entropy cannons into the Storm Raven, hitting on 4s. Getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 3, and it wounds. Minus 4 AP, so the Storm Raven will not get a save. And it will do D6 damage. And it will do 6 damage. So this Storm Raven will drop from 13 wounds down to 7. And now for the Heavy Slugger. 4 shots, hitting on 4s. Getting 2 hits. Wounding on 5s. And failing to wound. So now, going into the assault phase, this Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings will declare a charge onto the Storm Raven. And then all 3 of these units will declare a charge onto Guilliman. And these units are just over an inch away, they are not charging through a crater, and there is no overwatch, so I will move them in first. So the Malignant Plaguecaster will make it in, and he is now in base to base. Next, the Tallyman will charge in, and he is now also in base to base. And finally, the Plague Surgeon will charge in, and the Plague Surgeon will also be in base to base. But the Demon Prince charging into the Storm Raven will have to suffer overwatch first. So, starting with the 2 Hurricane Bolters, 24 shots, hitting on 6s, resulting in 3 hits, wounding on 5s, and failing to wound. The Twin Heavy Bolter will fire next, 6 shots, hitting on 6s, and failing to hit. Next will be the 2 Storm Strike Missile Launchers, hitting on 6s, getting 1 hit, wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which passes. Finally, the Twin Heavy Plasma Cannon will fire standard shots. 2 D3 shots, getting 5 shots. Hitting on 6s. And no hits and 3 1s, so it's just as well it fired standard shots. And the Demon Prince is just over an inch away, about an inch and a half, and so it will automatically make it in. So going into the fight phase for Death Guard turn 2. First, we have to resolve Mortarian's Host of Plagues, which now only activates on a 6, and it fails to activate. And so the Death Guard will start by having the Malignant Plaguecaster attack first onto Guilliman. So the Malignant Plaguecaster will have 3 attacks base with its Corrupted Staff onto Guilliman, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits and 2 6s, which thanks to its special rule, Death to the False Emperor, each time you roll a hit roll of 6-up for a model with this ability in the fight phase, it can, if it was targeting an Imperium unit, immediately make an extra attack against the same unit using the same weapon. These extra attacks cannot themselves generate any further attacks. So getting 2 extra attacks. And here's the 2 extra attacks. Getting 1 hit, which unfortunately does not generate further hits, and 1 reroll thanks to the Tallyman. So here's the reroll, and getting a 5th hit. So getting 5 hits out of 3 attacks. Thanks to the Corrupted Staff, the Malignant Plaguecaster is Strength 6, and thanks to Toxic Presence from Mortarion, Guilliman is Toughness 5. So wounding on 3s, and only getting 2 wounds. And unfortunately, no rerolls, since it is not a plague weapon. So 2 3-up invulnerable saves, and he passes both. So now the Ultramarines will use the stratagem counteroffensive for 2 command points, which will bring them from 3 down to 1. This stratagem is used right after an enemy unit that charged has fought. Select one of your own eligible units and fight with it next. So first, rolling dice to see if they roll 5-ups to get the command points back. And they do not. The Ultramarines are now permanently down to 1 command point. And obviously, the target of that stratagem will be Rabout Guilliman, who, thanks to Gift of Contagion, has only 5 attacks base this time. Rabout Guilliman will use all 5 attacks with the Emperor's Sword onto Mortarion. So, 5 attacks hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, and getting 4 hits and 1 reroll. And here's the 1 reroll, getting a 5th hit. Strength 8 versus Toughness 7 means 3s to wound, getting 3 wounds and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls, still failing to wound. 3 4-up invulnerable saves. And he passes all of them, and Mortarion will survive. Oh, wow. That's a turn of events. So now the Demon Prince of Nurgle will strike against the Storm Raven. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle, 7 attacks. Hitting on 2s, rerolling 1, 6s generate additional attacks. Getting 6 hits and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, getting 7 hits. Strength 7 versus Toughness 7 means 4s to wound. And getting 5 wounds. Minus 2 AP, so 5-up armor saves. Passes 1 and fails 4, and they're 2 damage apiece, so that is 8 damage, which will kill off the Storm Raven since it only has 5 wounds left. So does it crash and burn on a 6? And it does not. So this Storm Raven is removed, and the Demon Prince will not consolidate. So now the Plague Surgeon will attack Guilliman. So the Plague Surgeon with 3 attacks base, using the Bale Sword, hitting on 3s. Getting 1 additional attack and 1 reroll. So doing the reroll first and getting a 2nd additional attack. So 2 additional attacks, getting 1 hit and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, getting 5 hits with 3 attacks, just like the Malignant Plaguecaster. Wounding on 5s, but rerolling everything thanks to being a plague weapon and being within 7 inches of Mortarion and his Warlord traits, that he gets to reroll every failed wound roll with the plague weapon. So 2 wounds and 3 rerolls. And here's the 3 rerolls, still failing to get any more wounds. 2 3-up invulnerable saves, and passes both. So now the Tallyman will attack Guilliman. 3 attacks with his fists, hitting on 3s. Getting 2 hits and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll, still failing to hit. Wounding on 5s, and failing to wound. And I just realized that the Tallyman could have been giving them command points back because he was out in the field. I don't remember, unfortunately, exactly how many command points they've used since the Land Raider was blown up, but I'm assuming that they used 5. Since I think they only used 1 before the Land Raider blew up. So, need to roll 2 dice 5 times, looking for 7s. So, here's the first roll, not getting a 7. Second roll, not getting a 7. Third roll, not getting a 7. That's 3 8s in a row, by the way. Fourth roll, does get a 7. And 5th roll, gets another 8. But that does mean the Death Guard will have 1 command point left. Now, luckily, I don't think there are any points where I would have used a command point between just now realizing it and the last time I used one. However, I do apologize for forgetting that previously. So the Death Guard, with 1 command point left, not 0, will have 1 final unit in the fight phase that can fight, and that is Mortarion fighting back against Guilliman. So Mortarion, who has 4 attacks base, will use the Eviscerating Blow form of Silence. So 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, 6s generate additional, getting 1 reroll so far and 1 additional attack. And here's the 1 reroll, still failing to hit, and the 1 additional attack. Does hit with the 2. So getting 4 hits, wounding on 2s, and gets 4 wounds. 4 3-up invulnerable saves, passes 3 and fails 1. And the Ultramarines are going to use their last command point, going from 1 down to 0, in order to re-roll the 2. And here's the re-roll. Still failing. So 1 wound will go through. It will do D6 damage. And it will do 5 damage. And Guilliman has 5 wounds left, so that will kill Guilliman. However, thanks to Guilliman's Armor of Fate, the first time Rabout Guilliman is reduced to 0 wounds. Roll a d6. On a 4-up, set him up again at the end of the phase, as close as possible to his previous position, and more than 1 inch away from any enemies, with d6 wounds remaining. So here's the dice roll, looking for a 4-up. And he comes back at the end of the fight phase. So once everyone is finished consolidating. And he will come back with D6 wounds remaining. And he'll come back with 5 wounds remaining. It's almost like he didn't lose anything, and now he's going to be out of combat. That is absolutely terrible for the Death Guard. And because we are currently in the Death Guard turn and will be going into the Ultramarines turn, they will not consolidate because they don't want to get any closer than they already are to the Ultramarines. Which means Guilliman, after going down and then getting back up again, will end up here because that is the closest possible position to his original position while being just over an inch away from any enemy models. So Guilliman is back with 5 wounds left, and so Slay the Warlord has still not happened. And so going into the morale phase for Death Guard turn 2, there are no morale tests to take. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards, the Death Guard have now finished defending objective 1, which is worth 2 victory points. The Death Guard have not secured objective 2, and they did not complete Grandfather's Gift thanks to Guilliman getting back up, because the Malefic Talons on the Demon Prince, which killed the Stormraven, are not plague weapons. And so the Death Guard failed to kill a unit with the plague weapon. And so because of that, the Death Guard are going to throw Grandfather's Gift away. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 2, the score currently sits at 6 victory points for the Death Guard and 9 victory points for the Ultramarines. And actually, because Guilliman managed to come back with 5 wounds, the Death Guard at this point are going to concede the game. And so after 2 full turns, the game is now over, and the final score will be 6 victory points for the Death Guard and 9 victory points for the Ultramarines, and we will have an Ultramarines major victory. There is no Slay the Warlord for either side, and there is no line breaker for either side. However, because this is the mission Kill Confirmed, we do have to add in kill points to each side's score, and so the actual final score will be 7 victory points for the Death Guard, because they killed the Stormraven, and that's the only full unit that they destroyed, and the final score for the Ultramarines will be 11 victory points, because they fully killed off the Land Raider and the Plague Marine squad. So, we have an Ultramarines major victory thanks to a concession, and the final score is 11 for the Ultramarines and 7 for the Death Guard. And so, now that the game is over, with it being revealed that the Ultramarines have a victory through concession, and the final score is 11 versus 7 in the Ultramarines' favor, I can go over a couple of my final thoughts in the game, and I'll try to keep this short and sweet. First of which is I need to make one last correction, and that is the Death Guard are not able to throw away Grandfather's Gift. Not that it actually matters, because the game is over and they conceded, but they can't actually throw that away because this is the mission Kill Confirmed, which means any tactical objective card dealing with killing an enemy unit cannot be thrown away unless it is impossible. And unfortunately for the Death Guard, it is not impossible to achieve, it's just far less likely. But they actually can't throw that one away. Not that it matters, because they had to concede. And the main reason for them conceding, there's a major reason and a minor reason, although the minor reason is still fairly major. The major reason is Guilliman came back to life. And not only did he come back to life at the end of the fight phase of Death Guard turn 2, but he came back with 5 wounds left. In fact, Guilliman coming back to life is the main reason why Death Guard has to concede this game. Because the fact that Guilliman comes back to life not only provides his firepower, and it would not surprise me if he was able to finish off the final 3 wounds on Mortarion on his own. No, the problem is his aura of abilities, and the fact that now the Centurions would get to reroll failed wound rolls with their flamers. They could also reroll failed hit and wound rolls with their close combat weapons, and they are definitely within easy charge range of Mortarion. The fact that the other squad of Centurions is still embarked in the hovering Stormraven, and so the Ultramarines have 2 full Assault Centurion squads within charge range, within easy charge range of Death Guard units. That is, if the second squad disembarks this turn. But most likely it would at this point, because anything important on the Death Guard side is pretty much within charge range of those Centurions. This is the Stormraven in question, of course, and the Centurion squad and the Chaplain with the Armor Indomitus are still embarked inside. They could very easily disembark, all 3 of these units being within charge range. The Plague Burst Crawler is within charge range. This Demon Prince is in charge range. The only units that aren't easily chargeable by either squad of Assault Centurions this turn would be the 2 squads of Nurgling Swarms and the 1 Demon Prince that's down to 2 wounds left. But that's fairly easy to take care of from the Ultramarine side, because they still have the 1 last cannon from that 1 squad left that could shoot the Demon Prince. And of course, the hovering Stormraven, after the units disembark, could pop back into flying mode, fly 30 inches right down the middle of the board towards that Demon Prince with 2 wounds left, the one that killed the other Stormraven in the previous fight phase, and then fire everything it has at Ballistic Skill 4, mind you, but the Demon Prince only has 2 wounds left. And so if he focused on that Demon Prince, most likely that Stormraven with the last cannon from the 1 Tactical Marine could probably finish off that Demon Prince. And we're talking about Death Guard being a turn away, only a turn away from having nothing on the board, but it's 2 squads of Nurgling Swarms. And that's it. At this point, there's just no point in playing out the game, because going into Ultramarines turn 3, and of course, Guilliman comes back at the end of Death Guard turn 2. So in Ultramarines turn 3, he can move normally, he can shoot normally, he can reposition himself. The Ultramarines have the upper hand so much that it's ridiculous. So that's the major reason, the minor reason. Major reason, the fact that Guilliman came back with 5 wounds, meaning that his whole aura of abilities is still fully available for the Ultramarines to utilize, which pretty much guarantees the death of Mortarion and these 3 units, of course, which is 4 kill points. Remember, this is kill confirmed. And the minor reason being that the Ultramarines still has so much other firepower available. Even if Guilliman died and stayed dead, the Ultramarines would still have a really good chance to severely hurt the Death Guard in the next turn. But with Guilliman still alive, that just makes it almost impossible that the Death Guard would not be hurt beyond repair for the rest of the game. So I have a few more corrections that need to be made at the end of this game, just so that everyone knows that I did catch them. Unfortunately, just caught them too late to do anything about. First and foremost, I completely forgot this entire game that the Plague Surgeon's ability for people within 3 inches of him to re-roll disgustingly resilient rolls of 1, completely forgot that existed. And so I know, because I am filming this part after editing the entire rest of the video, which is why I had to come back and make it, because I realized there were too many mistakes to go without saying. I know there were multiple disgustingly resilient rolls of 1 that should have been re-rolled that were not. I know that there was a disgustingly resilient roll of 1 that I used a command point to re-roll and should have just used the Plague Surgeon's Aura of Ability, so I do apologize for that. I know there were other times when units rolled disgustingly resilient rolls of 1 and they should have re-rolled them. There was one time, I believe it was the Plague Champion, when Guilliman killed him off, he rolled 3 disgustingly resilient rolls, passed 1 and failed 2, but one of the 2 fails was a 1, and so they could have used the Surgeon's ability to reroll the 1 and used a command point to reroll the 4, and possibly that Plague Champion would have survived, which would have denied 4 victory points for the Ultramarines because of priority orders received, so I do apologize about that. I also completely forgot that the Malignant Plaguecaster did successfully get off Putrescent Vitality onto those Plague Marines, and so they should have been toughness 6, not toughness 5, which would have made it harder for Guilliman to wound in the shooting phase with the Hand of Dominion. Since the Hand of Dominion is only strength 6, there was at least one wound roll that should have been re-rolled and possibly would have failed. Let's see, what else did I forget? I forgot at the very end of the game when Guilliman used a command reroll to reroll his final invuln save, which did not successfully save after the reroll, but I forgot to roll to see if they got that command point back. So there's a chance that the Ultramarines would also have a command point left. And I also forgot about the Malignant Plaguecaster's ability that when he casts a psychic power and the psychic test is a 7, that then he has a special ability that goes along with that, which can potentially put mortal wounds onto nearby enemy units. And I completely forgot about that. Could have done a mortal wound to Guilliman and possibly the Storm Raven. Off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with the range of that ability, but I'll bet it would affect both units, so I do apologize about that. So yeah, there were multiple things that I forgot about in this battle report. I don't know that it would necessarily have changed too much in terms of the battle, but I do want to point out that I did see that I forgot to do multiple things, and so I do apologize about that. I still hope that you enjoyed the battle that happened, and stay tuned for the next one.